Oregon is extending Dan Lanning through 2028, and this is exactly the right move by Oregon, thinking for the future. There's a couple of facets to this, but the first of which being they are rewarding Dan Lanning for immediate success. Right? I mean, look at all that he's done at Oregon in the 1 year that he's been there. Landed a top 10 class in the 2023 cycle, won 10 football games, recruited a quarterback via the transfer portal to get them to those 10 wins. He's right now flirting with around a top 10 class for Oregon. I would be surprised if they're not right on the precipice of a top 10 class come signing day or within the top 10 come signing day. Remember those moves they made on last National Signing Day? I mean, they were the story of National Signing Day. Oregon right now is rewarding Dan Lanning for what he's done so far. And that's smart by them. Again, $45 million base for him right now over the next 6 years. Pretty good deal if you're Dan Lanning. Good for them, though, to act quick. Because as much as this is about rewarding, I think it's also very much so about protecting themselves. And we'll talk about that here. Make sure you're subscribed. Oregon Duck fans, we love y'all, man. We've had a lot of y'all join the party and subscribe. If you haven't yet, there is no time like the present. So go ahead and lock it in. We talk ball every single day here. College football, that is. We're live twice a week. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram at Judy Piquel. We'll keep you in the loop for all of it. Appreciate you in advance for doing that. All right. Like I was saying, while this extension for Dan Lanning is a lot about rewarding, I think it's almost just as much for Oregon about protecting. Because think about some of the past coaches that have had success at Oregon, or had early success rather. Willie Taggart, and I understand his success wasn't quite as much as you would have liked, but he had some early success, ends up leaving Florida State. Mario Cristobal leaves for Miami. Go all the way back to Chip Kelly, leaves for the NFL. Oregon has had some coaches leave them. And I don't think Oregon is a job that should just get the stepping stone label. Like, there is so much at Oregon to work with. Sure, it's not the most fertile recruiting ground, but still the resources of Nike, the national brand that it is, there's a lot here at Oregon to work with. And so Oregon's saying, okay, we got a coach here that we think can get it done for a long time. We're going to give him a bag. We're going to give him a nice big contract, and we're going to build up a nice little fortress around ourselves here to where if you want to come and take Dan Lanning from us, it's a $20 million buyout. Your move to whatever Sharks want to try and grab Dan Lanning from Oregon. Because remember, around that Auburn job, there was some buzz with Dan Lanning. He shut it down, and he said, I want to stay in Eugene as long as they'll have me. He said all the right things. And I don't think he was lying, but I just want to make sure that it's very, very clear. There's going to be a lot of football teams now, when jobs become available, that will want Dan Lanning. If you're an Oregon fan, you're probably keeping a little bit of a side eye on that Florida situation. I'm not here to talk about Billy Napier. You know I'm a Billy Napier guy until there is a large enough sample size for us not to be. What happens at Florida in the long term? Do they start knocking and trying to grab Billy Napier? A school in the ACC, Mac Brown. I love me some Mac Brown now. How long does he want to keep coaching? Right? I mean, there's a lot of schools, and we can go through different scenarios about, who could want Dan Lanning. The bottom line is people will want Dan Lanning. And so for Oregon to see him be successful, know they got to do it as their head coach right now, give him a bag, keep in Eugene, protect yourself, get a buyout. Very, very wise move here by Oregon. Now, as much as it's about rewarding, as much as it's about protecting, I think it's also quite a bit about insuring yourself at Oregon. And I'm not talking about what I just said with the buyout and ensuring that you get yours if Dan Lanning does get hired away or whatever it ends up being. Like, I'm not here to talk about that so much. When I say insuring, I mean ensuring that what you have right now in Eugene, the mojo, the momentum, all that it stays intact. And even more so, you're pumping it with some more juice too, because they had a top 10 class last year, like I said. I think knowing that your coach ain't going nowhere probably helps recruits in the future as well. You also are ensuring yourself that when that college football playoff expands in 2024, you got a head coach to go and get after it there. You're not going to be in the situation where you got to hire a new coach and figure it out and, the college football playoff expanded, but we're kind of missing our window. Like, I think for Oregon, they are making sure that they have the armor, the whole setup, the whole protection setup to be able to move into that era with a head coach that I think is one of the rising stars in the industry. I mean, 37 years old, dude's just getting started. Like, to be real, his coaching career is just at its jumping off point in terms of the star that he's going to be. And the way he's building Oregon now, we've talked about it a lot. He values the big human beings up front. This is not the Oregon that was so flashy and they ran, such a up-tempo offense that was cutting edge, and they play Stanford and they're just not strong enough. That's not the Oregon team that he's building. He's building an Oregon team that can go play in the Big Ten Conference, which we'll see what happens with expansion here. A team that could go play against SEC teams in the future if they continue to recruit well in the trenches. Like, that's the kind of approach he's taking. And so to have a contract in place to ensure that that kind of approach and that process gets to be seen through, I think is really wise by Oregon. Because remember this, coaches that win have the right support by their university in the sense that they get time and they get resources. Resources are not a problem at Oregon. Is it right smack dab in a hotbed of recruiting? Not necessarily. But you got the national reach, and you got a head coach that understands that national reach and is willing to go and get the guys to make his football team what he needs it to be to compete how Oregon expects to compete. Okay, so you got the resources, and now you're telling Dan Lanning, hey, we're going to give you the time. We want you to stay at Oregon through 2028. So big time for Oregon, big time for Dan Lanning. We'll see what happens with the Pac-12. This is not a conference expansion video for Oregon, but good for Oregon locking down their guy and keeping an eye towards the future of the college football landscape. Subscribe right here. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Search The Hard Count with J.D. Pickell, Apple and Spotify for your podcast. Full hour-long episodes for you. You can also catch us live on the YouTube channel Tuesday or Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.